Good evening and welcome to this week's edition of Inside Red Dragon Sports. I'm your host, Geoff Hassard, Assistant Director of Athletics and Sports Information Director here at SUNY Oneonta. And tonight we're going to be talking issues in college athletics. Tonight we've invited into studio Director of Athletics, Tracy Ranieri, and a very special guest, College Hall of Famer, Don McPherson. So please join me after the break, where we'll start our discussion about tonight's activities.
What makes D3 special is the ability to participate in my team and within the broader community.
The perfect ending to a perfect season.
Being a D3 student athlete has completely expanded my life.
I learned how to lead. I really found a voice.
What time is it?
It's more about the experience rather than just a sport itself.
Without the experience of being a Division III student athlete, I wouldn't be the person who I am today.
NCAA Division III. Discover, develop, dedicate.
Welcome back to the show. Joining me now in studio is Director of Athletics here at SUNY Oneonta, Tracy Ranieri, and College Hall of Famer and former Syracuse All-American, Don McPherson. Welcome to the show, Don.
Thank you very much. Good to be here.
Well, why don't you, before we start with our discussion about issues in college athletics, could you just let us know a little bit about your background and what you've been doing for pretty much the last quarter century, right?
Since my days at Syracuse.
Yeah.
Well, obviously played a little bit of football after that, both the NFL and the Canadian Football League. But primarily have been involved in educational programs around social issues with students and student athletes specifically, but with students at large, on a whole host of issues, everything ranging from drunk driving in the early years to getting more involved in issues like hazing and bullying, and as well as domestic violence and sexual assault and other issues. So I do a lot of speaking on college campuses around the country, and then also do some advising and consulting with a lot of national organizations on building programs that can help address different social issues. Now,
you've certainly had a pretty full day here at Oneonta. You met with our athletic department staff today. You've met with a men's group we have here on campus that's trying to start up. We just came from an event with some students who are in education majors and just trying to find out all about what's out there and ways to deal with these issues in social. Now, Tracy, from athletic director's point of view, we've had some issues recently in our own sister institutions, some hazing, which actually cost one of our sister institutions an entire season, and then also just even more recently, a murder on a campus involving a student athlete. As a director of athletics in a Division III institution, I mean, what kinds of things run through your mind, and how do we act? How do we go about doing?
Wow, well, I guess it starts with good people, and I think we're really fortunate to have good coaches that are constantly learning, and this college environment is just fantastic for doing that. Don, thank you so much for coming to the campus. You've been doing so many things. I think you're best to ask this question in relation to, if we could just stay with college sports for a second, what you've seen and how we, at this time in social media,
right,
in our young culture today, what can we as coaches do to really help young people develop healthy relationships and prepare them for life after college sports?
I do think that sports sits in a very unique place, and coaches in particular, but I think the entire athletics department, whether it's on a college campus or even in high school, sports sits in a unique place. It's right at the intersection of the athletic, academic, and social lives of student athletes. And so they come into the locker room, they come into the building with all of this baggage. And the baggage may be their classwork, the baggage may be their relationships. And it is a unique opportunity because coaches in particular, and we talked about this earlier, have this place where I still refer to my college coach as coach. And so many young people do look back on their fond memories of coaches, and they realize that mantle of this person was really there and saw me mature and saw me go through that. So I think if coaches recognize that, and we in athletics recognize that we can seize the opportunity to have meaningful conversations with student athletes about important issues. And what happened recently at Brockport and happens unfortunately far too often should be teachable moments where we take pause and not say, and not just lament on how bad it is, but we take a moment to have a really brutal and difficult conversation about behavior and about safety and about having the conversation before bad things happen so that we're not witnessing the aftermath. And so I think it is time to take a pause and have a conversation about what really matters beyond the X's and O's.
Right. Now, and when we were talking with all the groups that you've been with today, you said the hardest thing to do is have that conversation. I mean, where do you begin that conversation?
I think it's like anything else. What we do, and sports is a great example, because in anyone who's been involved in sports or theater or music or television, we all start with the fundamentals. Every day we unpack the fundamentals. So in sports, we stretch, and then we go little small drills, and then we go individual drills, and then we bring in more team elements into our drills and our work. And so we start with the individual, we start with the fundamentals. So when we talk about social issues, it's language, it's attitude. There is no wrong answer. It's just bringing what we know and who we are to the conversation, so that we can start to build on that and have a more meaningful conversation that starts with the individual and starts with what you bring to the room. Again, we do this in sports and theater and music. We assess where people are, and we help some people along on the conversation, but all of it with a team goal in mind of having that. We want to prevent bad things from happening. So we want to equip our teams with good communication skills, with a good understanding of the issues, and so that they can see things coming before they happen, just as we do in sports, and they're able to anticipate and then make the changes necessary to prevent bad things from happening.
Now, you
sounds simple, but
I know there's so much involved in that.
Sure.
Performing at such a high level that you did, I mean, All-American, runner-up in the Heisman Trophy. I mean, do you draw on those experiences as a student athlete when you're out talking to other, not just student athletes, but even just general students?
I can draw on some of the stories, because there's some rich anecdotal stories that can kind of demonstrate how you work together as a team or how you persevere through adversity. But the thing that I draw on it more than anything else was that when we think about social issues, as I said, number one, preparing to make good decisions. I never thought of myself as an elite athlete. I never thought of myself as doing something that was extraordinary. I was doing, and we used to have an expression that was actually right along with that. We said, we're not expecting extraordinary men to do ordinary things. We're expecting ordinary men to do extraordinary things. And so I think the same thing is true in doing the kind of work that I do, is that I don't think of myself as that special of a person. But I work with special people who are equally or like-minded, and we work together towards common goals. And when we do it together, you don't see it. I remember talking about the focus that it takes to play in a big game. I didn't notice all the fans in the Sugar Bowl. I rarely noticed the fans in the Carrier Dome until you stop and you look up and you go, wow, there's people here. Because you're so focused on what you're doing and you care so much about what you're doing. And when we do that in ways around social issues, if we have a common goal as a team, that we want to protect our teammates, we want to make sure that no one gets involved in bad drug behavior or alcohol behavior, or drunk driving, or worse, some of the things we've talked about, then we as a team have to agree to that, and we have to work towards that. And when we do that and we have some language, it can actually be fun. It can actually be something that's not just a don't do this, don't do that, but actually something that we work towards in a positive way. And if anything, that's how I look at my experience as a student athlete, or as an athlete, period. So I was so focused on the goal and the process to get to that goal, that I didn't see all the other things that people on the outside see. Is like, as you said, when you start describing, as that kind of elite athlete, I go, I'm looking around like I don't know who you're talking to, because I really felt like I was a part of a lot of people working towards a common goal.
Do you feel that you were prepared to do what you're doing now? I mean, you were an athlete, obviously a great athlete, and you were a good student. I mean, how did you combine the two of those to prepare yourself for what you're doing now?
I think, and I tell students this all the time, student athletes and non-students, is that you have to find your passion. You have to find what really drives you, what gets you out of bed, what makes you want to have a conversation with someone you've never met, what makes you want to talk about something. And that thing that you find is going to be a passion that you'll have no matter what. I'm blessed beyond my own comprehension that I get to do the work that I do. Unfortunately, the work exists. However, I'm blessed that I get to talk about something that matters to me, because I think a lot of people have those things that matter to them. I've been fortunate enough to be able to talk about things in a very honest way and learn from a lot of very brilliant people who have taught me about social issues in the way that they have, and allowed me to think and live outside of these very prescribed boxes that we find ourselves in. And I've been able to talk about it, and in the context of trying to prevent violence against women or move society forward in certain ways. I've just been really blessed to be able to have that opportunity.
Now, the presentation that you're really here to give to, for this evening, I mean, when the show shows, but the presentation you're going to give is really talking about building, inspiring a positive team culture. Where does that come from?
Well, I think if anything that you're going to accomplish as a group, you all have to move in one direction, and it has to be a very positive direction, and where everyone is being appreciated in that direction. And a lot of times we will have setbacks. We'll have things that can distract us from moving forward in a positive way. And so you have to establish a very open and positive team culture if you're going to get through the adversity that you're going to experience. And so the first thing you have to do is open up lines of communication, learn how to respect one another, learn how to communicate with one another in a positive way. And from that, so many other things. And let's face it, whether you're at Oneonta or at Syracuse, these are probably the last days that a lot of student athletes are going to ever play organized sports. Right. And so what are the real values and skills that we want them to get out of it other than winning and losing? Let's really focus on those positive values, because at the end of the day and at the end of the career and at the end of the life, you're going to look back on the positive moments, and there has to be a positive team environment in which to look back upon. Otherwise, it was like, that was a really bad time. I really didn't like those, those guys I played with, because it wasn't a good place to be. Right. And so we want to make sure that it's a positive place to be. Now,
you shared with us this morning about your 1987 team, which went undefeated, and certainly was a great team and a great season. But you said that the coach came to the the team leaders and captains and asked you what you wanted out of your your final season. So how did that translate into what what you're doing, and can you share that with us on how that?
It was Coach Mack, and I was one of 3 captains, and he came to us before the season, and I think he recognized that we had talent, that we had a group of men who were committed to getting better. And he challenged us in training camp, and he said, if you guys want to do something to make this team special, I'll support it no matter what it is. And we really had no idea what he was talking about. And he said it a couple more times and a couple more times. And then a group of us realized that he was trying to challenge us, and he mentioned alcohol a couple of times. And we, as a group, as a team, first captains and seniors, then the whole team, to be alcohol-free. And it wasn't perfect, and not every guy adhered to the letter, but it changed the culture on our team. It changed the Thursday night, Friday night culture, the Wednesday, Thursday, Friday night culture on the team. And as I've been mentioning, preparation is the key to performance. And so our practices were so much better in 1987 because guys weren't hungover. Guys weren't tired. Guys were actually getting up in the morning, having breakfast, going to class, and doing all those things necessary to prepare to play games. And we were better on Saturday because we were better during the week. And I truly believe that the lack of alcohol, or taking alcohol out of the regiment, did 2 things. It brought us together as people, and it gave us healthier, more alert guys during practice.
Now, you said earlier, you alluded to that these student athletes and the students that are coming now to us, they come with a lot of baggage. How do you take that baggage and translate it or transform it into a positive team culture where you've got people that might just not want to buy into it?
Well, I think you have to be, first of all, the not buying in is not the very sporting way to go about things, right? So the first thing you have to appeal to their goal of buying in is the way we win, right? I mean, we all have to buy into what the coach says, to the schemes and the plays that we run and the way we prepare. So we have to buy in. But the other thing is that we can't be afraid of the conversation. And this is true of adults. It's always been true of adults. That we get to a point where we feel like we either are incapable or kids have a different world where things are moving too fast, and we don't have the frank conversations with young people. And I think now more than ever, it really is important, very important, that we as adults help them navigate, because of technology, because of how quickly information can move and how much access they have to that information. They need more help navigating that information. And so when they come to campus, they come with 18 years of socialized behavior around a lot of issues that they might not have the wisdom to actually make good decisions. And so you have to talk to them. You have to continue to have an honest conversation that tells them you understand. Not just that you don't want them to do things, but you understand the decisions that they have to make around certain behaviors.
Right. Now, part of what we're talking about tonight, your presentation, violence against women, I mean, you call yourself a feminist. Can you explain how a male is a feminist? I mean, I guess that's what it is.
It's very simple to me. Feminist is no different than a lobbyist or an environmentalist. It's IST at the end, which says you care about what comes first. And I saw a bumper sticker once that said, feminism is the radical view that women are people too. I go by that. I checked in with Gloria Steinem years ago. I said, is that okay? And she goes, that's good with me. And I think sometimes people complicate the word or try to make the word a bad word, when the reality is you're fighting for equal rights for women, equal pay for equal work, for any of the kinds of rights. As I always say, as a black person, I got the right to vote before women in this country, and there were people who were fighting for rights and would continue to fight for those rights. And so I stand alongside the women who were pioneers in so many advances, whether it's Title IX or women's suffrage and so many different advances for women. I stand next to those women and I identify as a feminist because I like it.
Yeah, well, and it's funny you should mention Title IX. It's the 40th anniversary of Title IX. When you were growing up and you were a college athlete, I mean, was Title IX something you were aware of?
No, in fact, it wasn't until the Brown decision that really woke a lot of people up in athletics. And really, quite frankly, Title IX was not a piece of legislation that was designed for athletics in higher education. Right. But the Brown decision really put it on the forefront of the conversations and really established athletics and higher education as really the front lines of the Title IX argument. It was a piece of legislation that was written in 1972 and encompassed a lot more than women's athletics, and really had to do with federal funding and federally funded programs. And so where we saw the advances for women, and the Women's Sports Foundation has done a tremendous amount of research on the benefits of women and girls participating in sports, and girls in particular participating in sports. More likely to go to a four-year institution, more likely to graduate from that institution, less likely to become pregnant as teens, and all these different qualities that women were, or advantages that women were seeing because of their participation in sports. I don't even think we need Title IX after we see that kind of evidence of how important women's participation in sports is. But as long as we don't have that same level of participation and same level of rights, we'll continue to fight under Title IX. So,
what is the message that you would say to men, college men, right now in the work that you're doing?
I think one of the things when you look at violence against women and men's violence against women, we tend to look at it as it's a prevention effort, and it is a prevention effort. We do need to end men's violence against women, but we also need to engage men as part of the solution. And so we can't just look at men as the perpetrators of violence. We have to look at men as bystanders, but we also have to look at men as those who can raise the next generation of men to be nonviolent. And so we do have to talk and have a conversation with men about masculinity and what it means to be a man, not just to prevent violence against women by raising a generation of nonviolent men, but also talk to men about our own health and our own well-being in terms of our own understanding of what it means to be a man. Right now, it's a very narrowly defined thing. It's to be tough, strong, don't show emotion, don't share your emotions. That's very narrowing, and it can make you very angry if someone told you you're only allowed to live inside this small box. You're not allowed to live outside of it. We always hear people talking about thinking inside the box. We want men to live outside that box, to identify with being loving and caring, nurturing, vulnerable. I'm all those things, not in touch with my feminine side, but I'm all those things as a whole man. And that's part of the message that we have to engage men, because if we just talk to men about violence against women, that gets tiring, and it also becomes an indictment, because we have that conversation after something bad has happened, and after something bad has happened, men typically 9 times out of 10 are the perpetrators. And so we'll shut down in that conversation. We won't really have that vibrant conversation. But if men can see the value in having a conversation about who we are as whole people, which makes us better. I always say this in athletics. If you can only go to your left in basketball, you're going to get shut down quickly, right? But if you can only shoot the jumper, but you can't do anything else, you're going to get shut down. It's no different as a person. If your only view of the world is from this narrow view of masculinity, that I have to be a tough guy that can't show his emotions, that's supposed to put down women to be cool to other men, it's going to get really tough for you in life. And it's a very narrow view of who you are. And as a parent, as a son, as a brother, as a friend, I am so much more. I'm none of those tough guy things. I'm loving, I'm caring, I'm understanding, I'm sensitive, I'm empathetic. And those are the qualities that we need to say it's not just being a part of your feminine side, but a part of your wholeness as a man.
Fantastic.
2 young children at home, and certainly you're going to pass on life's lessons and the things that you've learned along the way? I mean, what things, maybe one or two things in particular, it would be your message to them as they grow?
I think more than anything else, we, and I say we, if you're watching this or have a chance to see this, we live in a country where we have so many blessings, and I'm aware that my children will get a great education. They're in a good school district. They have people around them who care. They have parents who love them. The most important thing, and I think a lot of people can identify with that, and even people who are struggling. People are struggling right now, but I think the most important thing that we can do as parents is to open up lines of communications and not judge our children, and not think that their culture that they're growing up with is so vastly different from our own. We have this in terms of generationally. They still have the same needs to talk about the things they're seeing, to navigate the social environments that they're experiencing, and most importantly, more than anything else, is not to shut down that conversation because I'm uncomfortable.
Right.
And I think that's the one thing that I try to do more than anything else, and I try to tell parents is don't shut down that conversation, because there's going to be plenty more where that came from.
Right.
When you start dealing with the reality, and we know what we did as young people. It's getting worse and worse, younger and younger, and so it's more incumbent upon us as adults and parents to have that open and honest conversation with our kids. And
how do you see the role of a coach as kind of acting like a surrogate parent when these kids come to college campuses? I mean, how do you see the role of the coach in that?
You say the role of the parent, parentis locus, right?
Yeah.
It is, you are the parent, and I think that coaches need to recognize it and look and say, this is how I would want my child. It's do unto others as you want, done unto you, right? Coach unto others as you want someone to coach unto your child.
Right.
And really say that, am I being fair? Am I being just? And I mean that in all respects, because I think part of coaching is also being honest with young people about where they are and where their skills are. And I think probably more than anything else, I always say that the coach's job is to make sure that student athletes are having fun while they play, and obviously gaining skills and fundamentals. But I think now more than ever, coaches play a unique role in being on the front lines of a lot of things that are going on with young people.
Well, as we close up here, if you look back on your athletic career, including high school, maybe youth sports, I mean, what could you point to one thing that you really learned that you would say, boy, I'm glad I was a student athlete or an athlete?
I think it is to fall in love with preparation. We live in this results-oriented, event-oriented society where we have the Super Bowl or the World Series or the Final Four and these very big events, and I think it's that's not what it's all about. It's all about, like right now, your student athletes here, right now they're dragging themselves out. We just saw a couple of the women from the lacrosse team dragging themselves out to practice and going out there and working at it. Fall in love with that. Fall in love with sitting in the library and reading and studying. Fall in love with the preparation, because the day you take an exam or the day you play in a game are only the opportunities you get to demonstrate what you prepared for. So fall in love with the preparation, and all those other things will fall in place.
Well, we certainly want, on that note, I mean, that's a perfect way to end this segment, and we certainly would, again, thank you for taking time out of your very busy day that you had here on campus and giving us a message and delivering a message, and we know that you have some more tonight to another group of people. So thank you very much for coming.
My pleasure. Thank you.
All right. Well, I'd like to thank both my guests, Athletic Director Tracy Ranieri and former Syracuse All-American Don McPherson, for joining me tonight. And as always, you can follow us on www.oneontaathletics.com. Thanks for joining us this week, and we'll see you next time on Inside Red Dragon Sports.